We tend to have a pretty specific picture in mind when we think about danger in a relationship.
Definitely.
But what if that picture is really only showing us like half the story?
Yeah.
Today, we're going into territory that, well, it often stays in the shadows. We're looking at the struggles faced by men, specifically men in relationships with narcissistic women.
It's a tough reality.
Yeah,
And one that really needs a closer look.
absolutely. It feels like for a long time, the main narrative, society's story, has focused on men as the aggressors mostly.
Almost exclusively sometimes.
Yeah.
But the source we're digging into today is a YouTube video, The Silent Struggle Men in Dangerous Relationships with Narcissistic Women by Cardinal WYSE. It directly challenges that.
Cardinal WYSE, okay.
Yeah. And interestingly, the speaker identifies as a woman. She's offering her insights, trying to shed light on what she calls a widespread, but often invisible crisis.
Okay, hidden epidemic. That phrase really jumps out. The video starts right off talking about a battle being fought in silence.
And a war waged behind closed doors. That's the phrasing. For men dealing with these really difficult partnerships.
Wow. It even uses this vivid analogy. It compares it to a murder mystery where everyone just assumes the butler did it.
Right, suggesting there's this sort of societal default, a predisposition maybe, to blame the man in relationship conflicts.
Which, when you think about it, that kind of ingrained bias could easily blind us to what male victims are actually going through.
Exactly. And the speaker points to stats suggesting millions of men suffer abuse from narcissistic partners. That's a huge number.
Millions.
And they also bring up research, apparently from the Center of Male Psychology. This research suggests that men in these situations, they often just don't recognize the manipulation.
They don't see it.
Not until the damage is pretty significant, until their lives feel, as the video puts it, shattered.
Shattered. That's a strong word.
It really underscores the need for, better awareness. Maybe campaigns specifically aimed at helping men spot these sometimes subtle patterns before it gets that bad.
It's not just acknowledging it exists, but giving tools to identify it early on.
Precisely.
And the video takes it further, right? It mentions findings from Psychological Today, linking narcissistic partners to aggression, both verbal and physical.
Yeah, they cite a really large body of research, something like 437 studies worldwide, which apparently confirms narcissism as a major risk factor for, actual violence in relationships.
So it's not just emotional pain, which is bad enough, but potentially physical danger, too.
Definitely a concern raised in the source.
Which really makes you pause and consider the question the video asks. Where is the outcry? Where are the support systems for these men?
It draws a really stark contrast with the support systems that are perhaps more visible or readily available for women.
Yeah. And that difference in how society responds, it raises big questions about why we might be, quicker to see female victimhood than male victimhood.
It's a complex issue.
Yeah.
And the video then digs into the role of shame and isolation. It argues that men, often from a young age, they're kind of conditioned to hide suffering. Don't show weakness, don't have your masculinity questioned.
The old stereotypes.
Exactly. And that pressure, that societal conditioning, it can create this environment where men just feel unable to talk about it, makes them more vulnerable to things like gaslighting, emotional manipulation, even physical abuse sometimes.
The video highlights a specific tactic too, right? Constantly telling the victim, you are the problem.
The example they gave was powerful. You know why I drink. You're the problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
That just perfectly shows how it shifts all the blame, deflects everything onto the victim.
And that constant undermining, it feeds right into the isolation. Men are made to doubt themselves, believe they're imagining things, or,
It's overreacting.
Exactly. Overreacting to abuse that is very, very real.
And then if they do try to reach out, they might face skepticism. That must be incredibly difficult.
Immensely difficult. The video directly asks, why aren't men given the same recognition as victims? Even considering physical differences. Why the disparity?
Yeah.
It shares this pretty telling anecdote. Men bending over backwards, getting thoughtful birthday gifts, trying to show affection.
Right.
Only to be just belittled, met with complete unappreciation. The speaker in the video uses some very direct language there. Describes the partner's behavior as like a selfish so-and-so and a, what was it, a little spoilt madam.
Spoilt madam, okay.
Which, whatever the exact term, it really gets across the emotional impact of that kind of constant dismissal and lack of gratitude. It digs into that psychological toll. Gaslighting, Fundamentally, it messes with your sense of
Yeah,
reality,
makes you doubt everything.
your own sanity, your perceptions, and that creates this power imbalance where the abuser's story becomes the only truth.
That leads into a really interesting turn in the video where it brings in a biblical perspective.
Yeah, a bit of a shift.
Yeah.
The speaker refers to Scripture, specifically Proverbs 5:3 to 6,
Mm.
and presents it as sort of ancient wisdom warning about deceptive people. They are for a very specific interpretation, too, saying something like, the father knew about this about women.
Okay. That's a direct take.
It is, and the passage they quote, it's very evocative language. For the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil.
It starts sweet.
But in the end, she is bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps lead straight to the grave.
Wow. Pretty intense.
Definitely. And the video's interpretation connects this directly to the progression of a narcissistic relationship. It starts with the sweet words, the honey, the smoother than oil.
The charm phase, maybe?
Right, but ends in destruction, the bitterness, the double-edged sword. The speaker argues that men caught in these webs, they often lose themselves entirely, become shadows, just drained of confidence, dignity stripped away.
It's important, though, like you said, to note that's the speaker's specific interpretation of that text.
Absolutely. Religious texts can be interpreted in many ways.
Yeah.
This is the lens presented in the source material.
But the video doesn't just leave people in that dark place. It emphasizes hope.
Yes, very clearly. There is hope, it says, and it outlines some first steps for getting free.
Which are?
Recognizing the signs, essentially. Seeing the patterns of manipulation, the control, what the video calls emotional warfare, and, crucially, rejecting the shame.
That shame seems like such a powerful barrier.
Huge. And letting go of it is presented as vital. Then there's another scriptural reference they bring in,
Oh, yeah.
Ephesians 5:11, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them.
Expose them.
The video really stresses that idea, the power of bringing hidden abuse into the light, of exposing it.
And that leads right into the call to action at the end, doesn't it?
It does. A multi-part call, really. First, to men who are currently suffering in silence, it offers reassurance. You are not alone.
Which is so important to hear when you feel isolated.
Absolutely. Then it calls on those who've gotten out, those who have escaped, to help others still stuck.
Pay it forward, essentially.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And finally, a broader appeal to all of us, to society, to really acknowledge and validate the experiences of male victims.
The core message seems really clear.
Yeah, abuse knows no gender. And flowing from that, justice must be for all. Powerful closing statement.
So wrapping up this deep dive then, we've really explored this often unseen side of relationship abuse, focusing on men dealing with narcissistic partners based on this particular YouTube video.
Right. We've touched on the societal biases the video highlights, this idea of a hidden epidemic.
Yeah.
We talked about the impact of shame and isolation.
The specific manipulative tactics described, like gaslighting and blame shifting.
And that call for recognition, for support, and ultimately for exposure.
And for you listening in, we hope this discussion has maybe offered some valuable perspective on a really complex aspect of relationships.
Yeah, just recognizing that these dynamics can affect anyone, regardless of gender. It's just a vital step towards a more informed and maybe a more empathetic view overall.
Absolutely. Which leads us to maybe a final thought to leave you with. Well, considering how strong these societal narratives can be, the ones that maybe stop us seeing the full picture, what other hidden struggles might be out there, in our communities that really deserve more attention, more understanding?
That's a really good question to ponder.
Yeah.
What else are we perhaps not seeing clearly?